have this little MK back in again. The customer was doing a track day a couple of weeks ago, and he said the clutch started to slip after a while, and then the car stalled and he couldn't start it again. It seemed like the battery was flat, so maybe the battery isn't charging. And also he said after about an hour's driving on track, the brake pedal started to feel a bit spongy near the end of the day. So we'll have to look into that. The charging system isn't working. It's a common enough problem with them. This is the rectifier here. I think they give trouble, and one can cause the other to go. There's a stator in the engine that puts out alternating current, and then this rectifier changes DC to charge the battery. So I'll have to do a few tests and see which one it is. Battery is good. I just seen on the rectifier here, there isn't a proper plug. The wires are just sort of being pushed in there. So that could be the problem. It could be just a loose wire and it's not charging. I'm going to start and just check, see if the battery actually charging after I'm playing with them wires there. Let me check the wire into the battery, maybe dirt or something. So I checked a few small things. Battery is power, it's okay. Starter's clicking. It's not, doesn't want to start. I put an earth directly from the engine onto the battery, just try it again. Seems to be any change. So I think I'll just turn over the engine and make sure the engine's free. Right, car's down on the ground on wheels. That's neutral. That's first gear. That's very tight. I'll check the oil, see what the oil looks like. I just lifted the car up just to make sure there's oil in it. So have a look at the little glass. There's oil in there. It's actually above the full mark. So I was going to drop the oil down just to see what the oil looked like, but I won't do that yet. What I might do is I'll take the spark plugs out and just see is it any freer there. Put the gearbox in neutral, and I might take the timing cover off here and see can I turn the crank and just make sure that the engine's free. And maybe it's tight because there's something wrong with the gearbox, or we'll try to diagnose it a bit that way, because it seems very tight for some reason. Yeah, it is turning over. Not very easy though. I'll take the airbox off and I'll take the starter out and see will the starter turn over. So that is the starter there, 210 volts. Right, so the starter is loose. I'll just set that there. Just see does that turn over if I try to start it. I can barely turn that. I think that could be damaged. The customer's after dropping out a new starter, so I'll fit that in, test it, make sure it's working. Okay, the starter's back in. I'll start this. Well, that's fine. I know it's that anyway. That's one thing sorted. Actually, I will start it and check if that's charging okay. charging anyway. So I had a look at the rear brakes. He said his brakes started to feel funny coming near the end of the day. The rear brake cable was touching the inside of the wheel. This cable is very tight and it won't reach to the, it should be really cable tied along the wishbone. It won't reach to the wishbone. It's just sort of floating there in midair. And it's flopping around and it touched the wheel waste that's on the wheel and wore through a tiny bit. Now it wasn't that exposed. I'm after pulling this back a little bit to have a look at it. So there's a tiny pinhole on that. So when he was braking, it was weeping there. So we're gonna have to replace this, and I'm gonna put a longer braided cable in and cable tie it along the wishbone, same as the far side. The far side has a longer one, so it can go along the wishbone. I'll disconnect all this here, see what thread this is and the size the pipe is, and I'll order all new parts for it. So I got a new braided line. I got a new brake braided line. This is the old one. I'm making the new one slightly longer. Only has to be about 2 inches longer, and then I can get it to the wishbone. So let's do the other side now. Both ends on, so I'll screw these back on and get this in position. To tighten up that braided line and get it all straight, I'm going to take the caliper back off, and I'm going to take the caliper off to bleed it anyway, because these calipers are on upside down. The bleed nipple is on the bottom, so I'll have to swivel the caliper up to bleed it, and I'll put the brake line on properly then as well. On the rears on both sides, I have to take the calipers off, lock out the caliper and push them up so they're upside down so I can bleed them, so the bleed nipple's on the top. Because when this is mounted on, the bleed nipple's down near the bottom. So to bleed these is a bit of a pain because I have to take the calipers off and mount them up there. But it is what it is. Right, that's a much better place for it there now. Shouldn't get in the way of any wheels. Right, so the brakes are done. It's now starting. The next thing I have to do is the clutch. I'm going to do the clutch next. The biting point of the clutch is really, really high. If he touches the pedal, it slips. So you can adjust that out of it, or see if there's something wrong with the cable or clutch. Hopefully I can just adjust that out of it. Side all right. The first bit of the clutch doesn't do anything. You need to take up the slack, and that's the biting point of the clutch. So the first 2 inches is just flopping the pedal, and then it starts to work. So yeah, so you're gonna tighten all that up a bit. This is the clutch here, and you can see the first bit of the clutch when you press it, it's just slacking the cable. So when you press it there, you've only a bit of movement. Actually, I'll put my foot in the clutch and see how far the clutch is actually pulling that. That's the clutch fully down, and that's about the biting point of the clutch. I took the clutch cable out just to make sure it was okay, and it seems fine. I've taken the slack out of the cable, so the first bit of the pedal won't be floppy, but as for the height of the biting point, I'd say it's going to be very high. There's not really much I can do with that. That's just the clutch that's in it at the minute. I thought I might be able to adjust it, but it was adjusted enough that the pedal was flopping around a little bit. So I'll move it back and forward and see what it feels like with no slop on the cable at all. The clutch does actually feel a little bit lighter, so obviously putting the oil into it did free it up a small little bit. But the biting point is a little bit high, but I don't think there's much I can do with that. It just is the clutch. It's a very light clutch. I think the next thing I'll do is I'll see where all this oil's leaking from. Probably what I'll do is I'll clean the engine off the best I can and start it, maybe go for a little bit of a drive, because there's oil just everywhere in the engine, so I'm struggling to see where it's coming from. Seems like it's coming from up here somewhere, but I do have to drop the oil and change the oil in this, so what I'll do is I'll just clean it all down and go for a bit of a spin, see can I see. I might just start it and leave it idle and see can I see any oil leaking out when it gets warm. When I was under here looking for the oil leak, I seen this. That's the gear selector is loose. So I tried to tighten it up and this bolt's just spinning. So I think what I'll do is I'll take this bolt out and put a longer one and put a nut in the end of it. Right, there's a bit of a change of plan. Clutch cable, since I poured all the oil into it and pressed the clutch a few times, is actually getting much lighter, and you can feel a little bit of a graining in the clutch cable. So I think putting a new cable in might just make that feel a little bit better. Also, the biting point in the clutch, it's high, but it's also really short. So the difference between it slipping slightly and fully out is only 2 or 3 mil on your feet, it feels like. Well, it's probably more like 10 mil, but it's very, very on off. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take the clutch cable out to get a new one and try change the pivot point in the pedal or the actual arm on the engine. The pedal would be an easier one to change because I have to be down there anyway, but I don't know if I have enough room or not. So I'll try to take the pedal out and see what we can do down there. It's not going to be the easiest thing to get into these pedals. I'll take the steering wheel off. I'm going to have to crawl in there head first. And this is the clutch pedal. Should I take that bush out? This is clutch pedal. So what I plan on do is welding this hole up and moving the hole slightly closer to wherever it pivots, so it has less of a leverage on it, so you have a slightly longer travel in the pedal. Also, I just noticed the car is leaking coolant, so I'll have to sort that out as well. And I might actually make a bush with the hole offset in it and move the hole further down so the pivot point's much smaller. At the minute, centre to centre is 38 mil. I can probably get down to 25 mil, and that will probably be enough. I won't need to change it on the engine then. So I have that offset bush in there now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole in the front of the pedal here and put a grub screw in that I can tighten in and lock that in place, or else if it could swirl around and then the ratio will be changed in the pedal. If that's too short of a ratio, we can twist the grub screw around and adjust it and adjust the ratio of the pedal. Had the clutch pedal back in and the cable onto it, and I found a problem. So when the cable sits, this is a shield here that sits inside the car, that sits into the chassis of the car. It just sort of steps down and holds the cable. That was already in the car, so the cable goes through there and that stops the cable going through the bulkhead. So when the pedal's up straight, the cable sits like that. Now when you press the pedal, you pull the cable out, which pulls the clutch. Then when you let go of the clutch, it goes back and it's hitting the entrance to this and not going back, not letting the pedal go back to where it should be. So I'm gonna have to round this off in here. Might have to weld something onto it and then try shape it so that the cable slides back in, because before the pedal was obviously acting fairly straight on the end of this, but now that I've shortened it, it's coming in at a small bit of an angle like that and it's catching the edge of it. Like if you hit it with your finger, it does go back down, but obviously you can't do that. So I need to get it so it returns back in there each time. So what I done with this was I actually cut a bit off the end of it and rounded the very end of it out, rounded all that out. So the end of the cable shouldn't actually hit that now. That's the cable fully back, so the cable will go like that now. So hopefully that fixes that bit of a problem. I think the next thing I'll do is I'll service it, just need to drop the oil. It only holds 3.5 litres. I thought with an oil cooler and that it might have held more than that. 3.5 litres, that's what was in it. much better than it did. Actually, the clutch pedal is so light now, it feels like the clutch isn't even connected to anything. It's just like a pedal. It's really, really light. I think the best thing is probably just let the customer drive it and see is he happy with it.